There are a couple words that I think are really important to how we deal with each other as human beings, how we cooperate, live with one another. But there are also two words that are often abused, and they are trust me. Trust is so essential for us. It's how we get along as people. A banker friend of mine back in the crisis in 07 and 08, when banks were closing and the real estate was crashing and all that, we were talking one night and he said, it's all built on trust. The whole system's built on trust. And when trust goes away, then it doesn't operate. And then we get these kind of crises. We need to reestablish trust. It takes a while to do that. But as just in our friendships, in our relationships with each other, trust is so essential. And how deep it hurts when somebody betrays trust. In tonight's gospel, I think Mark tells us these two stories because Jesus is talking about trusting him for both of those stories. In the first one, Jairus, a leader in the community, a leader in the synagogue, is finding that he doesn't have control over everything. His daughter of 12 is dying. And so in the story, he just becomes a dad who loves his daughter, a dad who would do anything for her. And so he goes to the one he's heard about, but clearly as a synagogue leader shouldn't be going to. But he goes to Jesus and seeks help from him because he knows that he's cured others, and maybe he would cure his daughter too. And Jesus goes with him. They head to the house. And on the way, there's an interruption from this woman who has been hemorrhaging for 12 years. I'm sure initially Jairus, inside of himself, must have thought, let's go. She's not well. We need to get there fast. It'd be like you or I being in an ambulance, and the ambulance driver says, I'm going to stop at Starbucks. And in the meantime, you're in the back getting keeping alive, and you're like, could we get to the hospital? No, I really need my Starbucks right now. So I'm sure Jairus must have like, what? Why are we stopping here? Let's get going. But this woman has been ill for 12 years. An illness that in the legal rules of the Jewish culture in her day would have meant that she couldn't come to the synagogue. She couldn't come to pray. She couldn't even touch anyone. Because if she touched somebody, they became unclean and would have to go through the ritual purification before they could pray again. 12 years. Just think back to where you were in 2012 and think, okay, some of you weren't alive yet. But 2012, and just think you got sick in 2012, and you've been sick all that time. 12 years of not being able to go to church to pray. 12 years of not being able to touch family. 12 years of suffering. And so she has heard about Jesus as well, but she knows if she touches him, he becomes ritually unclean. And so she has to do it secretly. So in the midst of the crowd, she reaches in, and she's probably gotten pretty good at that over the years, because 12 years of having to avoid touching anybody, so she could sneak in and touch him. But Jesus makes a point of it. But why? Why does he whirl around? Why does he seek her out? Because for Jesus, it's not just about the healing. It is about the relationship. He needs to look into her face. She needs to see him. And then he calls her daughter. When would have been the last time she heard anybody call her daughter? Daughter. It was her trust, her faith in Jesus that made it happen. And Jesus wants people to know that. This is what matters. That she trusted. She had faith in Jesus. That mattered. The relationship mattered. Now, we don't have her name, but we have enough about the story to know that she became a follower of his from that point on. So did Jairus. If we know somebody's name in Scripture, that's because they're still around years later when Mark is writing the story down. And Jairus says, let me tell you what happened at my house. So then they leave the woman and head to the house, and they come and say, she died. Don't bother Jesus anymore. Let him go. And Jesus hears all this commotion, people crying. And he says something that I've never said when I go into, planning a funeral with a family or being there right after somebody died. I have never said, why are you weeping? It seems like an odd thing to say to a crowd that has gathered in sadness. Why are you weeping? Duh. She died. But to Jesus, that's no different than sleeping. And that's how he approaches it. She's not dead. She's just asleep. He is going to wake her. He sees in Jairus' face some doubt. And so he says to him, all you have to do is trust me. Have faith. That's all it takes. Trust me. Have faith. Then Jesus walks in where the little girl is lying and says to her what her parents probably said to her every morning when they woke her up. Talitha cum. Little girl, get up. Time to wake up. Come. Then this man who can calm the storms, as we heard recently, who has power to do all kinds of things, is concerned that she's hungry. Hey, don't tell anybody, but she needs a sandwich. She's hungry. Feed her. It's about the relationship. It's about the trust. And Mark writes these two stories in there for us to remember that it's no different today. Jesus is inviting you and me to trust him, to put our faith there. even if we've been suffering for 12 years, even if we've tried everything else, even if it looks like death, to trust him. And he who is in charge of it all will bring about what needs to happen at that moment. He will look into your face as he did Jairus and this woman and say to you, daughter, son, you are saved because you trusted me.